Everyone, this is the Next Day Podcast, episode 90 with Mikel,
And Tanyka.
where we have conversations on different topics. So, we're going to be talking about something today.
Yep.
Um, what are we going to be talking about, Tanika?
So this is going to be the second episode of our Alexander Hamilton series that we're doing. The first one, if you didn't listen to that, was during Women's History Month, was Liza Schuyler, and who else did I talk about? Oh, Elma Sands. Um, this one, we're going to be talking about Aaron Burr, and we're finally going to be talking about the affair between Alexander Hamilton and Maria Reynolds. We kind of touched on it a bit last year, but I wanted to save it because, it was just way too much to do in that one episode. But we're gonna dig into that now.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Let's get to it.
Okay. So we're going to be starting with the affair first, because I've had these notes in my phone now for over a year, so they're first. So, in the summer of 1791, Alexander Hamilton received a visitor. Maria Reynolds, who was 23 years old, he himself would have been maybe 30-ish or so. She was blonde, came into Hamilton's Philadelphia residence to ask for help. Her husband, James Reynolds, had abandoned her. Not that it was a significant loss, for Reynolds had grossly mistreated her before absconding. Alexander Hamilton, who was 34, was serving as Secretary of Treasury at the time. And he was, well, they say New Yorker, but yeah. She thought he would surely be able to help her return to that city, because I guess that's where she was from, where she could resettle among friends and relatives. So Hamilton was eager to be of service, but he recounted later that that it was not possible at the moment of her visit, so he arranged to visit her that evening with the money in hand. When he arrived at the Reynolds home, Maria led him into an upstairs bedroom. I mean, girl, come on. I, she doesn't know this person. Let's lead you to the bedroom. A conversation followed, at which point Hamilton felt certain that, quote, other pecuniary consolation would be acceptable to Maria Reynolds. That's disgusting. Um, and thus began an affair that would put Alexander Hamilton at the front of a long line of American politicians forced to apologize publicly for their private behavior. Hamilton, if we remember, was married. She and her children were vacationing with relatives in Albany, and Maria Reynolds saw each other regularly throughout the summer and fall of 1791 until James Reynolds returned to the scene and instantly saw the profit potential in the situation. December 15th, Hamilton received an urgent note from his mistress saying, okay, I'm going to try my best to read through this because it's Old English,
Mm-hmm.
so bear with me. I have not time to tell you that the cause of my present troubles only that Mr. has wrote you this morning, and I know not whether you have got the letter or not, and he has swore that if you do not answer it, if you do not answer it, or if he does not see or hear from you today, he will write Mrs. Hamilton. He has just gone out and I am alone. I think you had better come here one moment that you may know the cause, then you will be better. She, okay, will not know how to act. Oh my God, I feel more for you than myself, and I wish I had never been born to give you so much unhappiness. Do not write to him. No, not a line, but come here soon. Do not send or leave anything in his power. Okay, 2 days later, Hamilton received a letter from said James Reynolds that accused him of destroying a happy home and proposed a solution. I mean, James Reynolds was an asshole. He was, he, mistreatment is like the nice way of putting it. He was verbally, physically abusive, and again, of a time where women depended on their men, he abandoned her. So,
Mhm.
happy home my ass. So, in that letter, though, he wrote, "It's true, it's in your power to do a great deal for me, but it's out of your power to do anything that will restore to me my happiness again. For if you should give me all your possesses, would not do it. God knows I love the woman and wish every blessing may attend her. You have been the cause of winning her love, and I don't think I can be reconciled to live with her when I know I can't her love. Now, sir, I have considered all the matter seriously. I have this whatever to make to you, basically a proposition. Give me the sum of $1,000, which is a lot of money in 1791, and I will leave the town and take my daughter with me. Oh, she had a kid. I didn't know that. With me and go where my friend shan't hear from me and leave her to yourself to do for her as you think proper. I hope you won't think my request is in a view of making me satisfaction for the injury done to me, for there's nothing that you can do with will compensate for it. Great. The way they talked and wrote in 1700s, I mean, just poetic. Anyways, rather than leave town in his new mark, James Reynolds allowed the relationship to continue. A pattern was established in which Maria Reynolds, by this time likely complicit in her husband's scheme, would write to Hamilton entreating him to visit when her husband was out of the house. Um, I won't read the whole note she said here, but this one little bit, she says, "I have kept my bed toe days past, but find myself much better at present, though yet feel distressed." She didn't write very well. "And shall till I see you fretting was the cause of my illness." Basically, she's just trying to get her mister? What do you call a man who's the mistress? Mister? I don't know. Um, to come over since her husband was not home. After such trice occurred, James Reynolds would dispatch a request for funds. Rather than demand sums comparable to his initial request of $1,000, which Hamilton did pay, he would request $30 or $40, never explicitly mentioning Hamilton's relationship with Maria, but referring often to Hamilton's promise to be a friend to him. I don't know why this didn't stop here. Again, like, you're involved with a married woman. The husband now knows. They're extorting you.
So, man equivalent of a mistress is manstress.
Manstress?
Yeah,
That's manstress. Wow.
yeah.
That's, I don't know if I like that word. Manstress.
Hmm?
Cool. Um, so James Reynolds, who had become increasingly involved in a dubious plan to purchase on the cheap the pension and back pay claims of Revolutionary War soldiers, so he's not just extorting a person who is in politics, who's a part of the administration, but he's targeting someone who is a soldier of war, and clearly not just doing it to Alexander Hamilton, but just anybody. Which there's a special place in hell for people like that. Even then, just a special place in hell. That's not cool. So anyways, he found himself, James Reynolds, on the wrong side of the law in November of 1792 and was imprisoned for committing forgery. Naturally, he called upon his old friend Hamilton, but the latter refused to help. Reynolds, enraged, got word to Hamilton's Republican rivals that he had information of a sort that could bring down the Federalist hero. So he contacted James Monroe, or I don't know if he contacted him, but James Monroe, accompanied by fellow Congressman Frederick Muhlenberg and Abraham Venable, visited Reynolds in jail and his wife at their home and heard the tale of Alexander Hamilton, seducer and homewrecker, a cad who had practically ordered Reynolds to share his wife's favors. Um, so no mention of Thomas Jefferson. He will be mentioned in a minute, but he wasn't the person who found out all the information. He just spread it. What's more, Reynolds claimed the speculation scheme in which he'd been implicated also involved the Treasury Secretary.
mm,
Um, so political enemy he might have been, but Hamilton was still a respected government official. And so Monroe and Muhlenberg in December 1792 approached him with the Reynolds story bearing letters Maria Reynolds claimed he had sent her. Aware of it being implicated in a nefarious financial plot due to his career and the fledgling nation's economy,
mm,
Hamilton admitted that he had an affair with Maria Reynolds and that he'd been a fool to allow it. You just now figured this out like a year later?
mm,
Idiot. And the extortion to continue. Satisfied that Hamilton was innocent of any wrongdoing beyond adultery, Monroe and Muhlenberg agreed to keep what they'd learned private, and that, Hamilton thought, was that. James Monroe had a secret of his own, though. While he kept Hamilton's affair from the public, he did make a copy of the letters that Maria Reynolds had given him and sent them to none other than Thomas Jefferson. Why are you making copies? And then sending it to Thomas Jefferson, who hates Hamilton. This is
mm.
amazing.
That's
This
funny.
is this at this part, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is way better than anything they could have put in the Broadway show. Oof. Hamilton's chief advisory and a man whose own sexual conduct was hardly above reproach. Thomas Jefferson got around. Um, the Republicans' clerk of the House of Representatives, John Bakley, may also have superstitiously copied them. So there's just copies upon copies of these letters. In 1796 essay, Hamilton, who had ceded his secretaryship of the Treasury to Oliver Wolcott in 1795 and was acting as an advisor to Federalist Publicans, impunged Jefferson's private life, writing, oh, he's coming at Thomas Jefferson about his affairs. When someone has dirt on you, just shush, don't say anything because you're gonna get
Mm,
screwed. So, anyways, he wrote these letters writing this that the Virginians, quote, simplicity and humility afford but a flimsy veil to the internal evidences of aristocratic splendor, sensuality, and epicureanism. He would get his comeuppance, Hamilton, in June 1797 when James Callender's The History of the United States for 1796 was published. Callender, a Republican and a proto-muckraker, don't know what that is, had become privy to the contents of Hamilton's letters to Reynolds. Hamilton would blame Monroe and Jefferson, though it is more likely that Beckley was the source, though he had left his clerk's position. Callender's pamphlet alleged that Hamilton had been guilty of involvement in the speculation scheme and was more litigious, I think is the word, sorry, than any moral person could imagine. End quote. In the secretary's bucket of chastity, Callender asserted, a drop more or less was not to be perceived. Callender's accusations and his access to materials related to the affair left Hamilton in a tight spot. To deny all the charges would be an easily proven falsehood. The affair with Maria Reynolds could destroy his marriage, not to mention his hard-won social standing. As we know, he'd married Elizabeth Schuyler, who was the daughter of uh, the Philip Schuyler, who was
mhm,
all part of the Revolutionary War. But to be implicated in a financial scandal was to Hamilton simply unthinkable. He's a treasurer. He can't be said that he did anything that would
Mm,
have been seen as treason. As Secretary of the Treasury, he'd been the architect of early American fiscal policy. To be branded as corrupt would not only end his career, but also threaten the future of the Federalist Party. Left with few other options, Hamilton decided to confess to his indiscretions with Maria Reynolds and use that confession as proof that on all other fronts he had nothing to hide. But his admission of guilt would be far more revealing than anyone could have guessed. Hamilton's pamphlet, Observations on Certain Documents, had a simple purpose. In telling his side of the story and offering letters from James and Maria Reynolds for public review, he would argue that he had been the victim of an elaborate scam, that you continued, you idiot, and that his only real crime had been an irregular and indelicate amour. To do this, Hamilton started from the beginning, recounting his original meeting with Maria Reynolds and the tryst that followed. The pamphlet included revelations sure to humiliate Elizabeth Hamilton because I don't even think he warned her that he was doing any of this. I think she found out her husband's indiscretions like everyone else. That he and Maria had brought their affair into the Hamilton home, and that Hamilton had encouraged his wife to remain in Albany so that he could see Maria without explanation. So not only are you having an affair in your bed that you share with your wife, you're actually telling your wife, don't come home. Men
mm,
suck. Not all men, but
mm,
most men.
mm,
Letters from Maria to Hamilton were breathless and full of errors. For example, I once to take up the pen to solicit the favor of seeing again. Oh, Cole Hamilton, what have I done that you should thus neglect me? How would Elizabeth Hamilton react to being betrayed by her husband with such a woman? Still, Hamilton pressed on in his pamphlet, presenting a series of letters from both Reynolds that made Hamilton, renowned for his cleverness, seem positively simple. On May 2nd of 1792, James Reynolds forbade Hamilton from seeing Maria ever again. On June 2nd, Maria wrote to beg Hamilton to return to her. A week after that, James Reynolds asked to borrow $300, more than double the amount he usually asked for, and Hamilton obliged, like a dummy.
mm,
Hamilton, for his part, threw himself at the mercy of the reading public, saying, quote, the confession is not made without a blush. I cannot be the apologist of any vice because the odor of passion may have made it mine. I can never cease to condemn myself for the pain which it may inflict in a bosom eminently entitled to all my gratitude, fidelity, and love. But that bosom will approve that even at so great an expense, I should effectively wipe away a more serious stain from a name which cherishes with no less of elevation than tenderness. The public too will, I trust, excuse the confession. The necessity of it to my defense against a more heinous charge would alone have extorted from me so painful and an edectrum. While the airing of his dirty laundry was surely humiliating to Hamilton and his wife, whom the Awar, a Republican newspaper, asserted must have just as wicked to have such a husband, so it is her fault that her husband was having an affair.
mm,
Because that's what you do. You blame the woman for everything.
mm,
It worked. The blackmail letters from Reynolds dispelled any suggestion of Hamilton's involvement in the speculation scheme. Still, Hamilton's reputation was in tatters. Talk of further public political office effectively ceased, because he most likely would have ran for president, and he might have won. Who knows? He blamed Roe, whom he half-heartedly tried to bait into challenging him to a duel. That's a bad idea. Duels do not work well for you, Hamilton. Oops, you're not dead yet. Sorry. This grudge would be carried by Elizabeth Hamilton, who, upon meeting Monroe before his death in 1831, treated him coolly on her late husband's behalf. She had, by all accounts, forgiven her husband and would spend the next 50 years trying to undo the damage of Hamilton's last decade of life. Hamilton's fate, of course, is well known, though in a way the Reynolds affair followed him to his last day. Some time before the publication of his pamphlet, Hamilton's former mistress, Maria Reynolds, sued her husband for divorce. The attorney that guided her through that process was none other than Aaron Burr.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the man who would kill Hamilton. Yeah, that part for me was like,
Hmm.
whoa, I didn't know that. But that's the affair, and that's a perfect segue into let's talk about Aaron Burr. I didn't know I would do that so perfectly. So, Aaron Burr, who was born in February 6th, 1756. I'm pretty sure that's my boss's birthday too, February 6th. Interesting. He was born in Newark, New Jersey, died September 14th, 1836 in Port Richmond, New York. Was the third vice president of the United States, so he ran from 1801 to 1805, who killed his political rival Alexander Hamilton in a duel in 1804. So during his presidency, or his vice presidency, I should say, and whose turbulent political career ended with his arrest for treason in 1807, which I think we did very briefly talk about during our um like our jury episode that we did.
Uh-huh.
So Burr, who was the son of Aaron Burr Sr. and Esther Edwards, came from a prominent New Jersey family and was a grandson of the theologian Jonathan Edwards. While he was still a young child, both his parents died, and he and his sister Sarah were ultimately raised by an uncle. At age 16, Burr graduated from the College of New Jersey, later Princeton University. His father had served as the school's second president and then began studying law. However, Burr halted his studies to fight in the American Revolution, which was from 1775 to 1783. He distinguished himself while serving with Benedict Arnold and was promoted to major. He then joined the staff of General George Washington. Both men reportedly developed a mutual dislike for each other, and he was soon transferred, which they do a pretty decent job of kind of showing that in the Broadway show. I was like, can like get away from me type thing with George Washington's way of thinking. It's pretty funny. Um, but hey, maybe George Washington just had a vibe. Maybe he just felt a vibe with Aaron Burr. Who knows? Um, so Burr then became an aide to General Israel Putnam, and became known for his bravery. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel, but in 1779 he resigned largely because of ill health. In 1782, Burr was admitted to the New York State Bar, and his law practice in New York City soon flourished. During this time, he married a widow, and the couple was together until her death in 1794. They don't say her name here, which I don't know why, but her name is Theodosia, who was married to a British officer during the Revolutionary War, and he was having an affair with her. I'm just um so 1784 and 1785, he was elected to the state assembly, and in 1789, he was appointed attorney general by Governor George Clinton. By 1791, he had built a successful political coalition against General Philip Schuyler, father-in-law of Alexander Hamilton, who, as we know already, was Secretary of Treasury, and won election to the United States Senate, incurring the enmity of Hamilton. Burr ran for vice president in 1796, but lost. The following year, he failed to win re-election to the Senate, losing to Schuyler, and spent the next 2 years in state politics. In 1800, Burr won the vice presidential nomination on the Jeffersonian Republican ticket. He carried New York State and thus helped bring about a national victory for his party. Under the Electoral College procedures then prevailing, the electors had cast their votes for both Thomas Jefferson and Burr without indicating which should be president and which should be vice president. Both men had an equal number of electoral votes, and the Federalist controlled House of Representatives had to break the tie. And that's where Hamilton sits, so to keep that in your mind. Although Burr maintained that he would not challenge Jefferson, an assertion that Jefferson did not wholly accept, Hamilton's determined opposition um, to Burr was a strong factor in Jefferson's election after 36 ballots. In 1804, the 12th Amendment to the United States Constitution was adopted, requiring electors to cast separate ballots for president and vice president. So very, very different than what it looks like now.
Mhm.
Burr took office, but he was marginalized by Jefferson, who had come to believe that Burr had been engaged in secret dealings to secure the presidency for himself. Who knows, he could have. That and other incidents left Burr deeply unpopular with party leaders, and his renomination as vice president seemed doubtful. In February 1804, Burr's friends in the New York legislature nominated him for the governorship. Hamilton contributed to Burr's defeat by disseminating letters containing derogatory comments about Burr. Shortly thereafter, Governor Clinton replaced him as a Republican vice presidential candidate. Once again, Burr felt himself to be the political victim of Hamilton's animosity, and he challenged him to a duel at Weehawken, New Jersey. Although duels were illegal in both New York and New Jersey, so not everything is legal in Jersey, the penalties were less severe in the latter state. The two men faced off on July 11th, 1804. There are conflicting accounts about what happened. Obviously, we're never going to really truly know. It is uncertain who fired first and whether Hamilton um, missed on purpose. That is how it's portrayed in the Broadway show, that he aims towards the sky, but we don't really know that's what happened. Um, or whether he shot wide after involuntarily discharging his pistol when hit by Burr. In any event, Burr was unhurt, but Hamilton was fatally wounded and died the next day. Arrest warrants were issued for Burr, whom many now viewed as a murderer, and he fled to Philadelphia, where he contacted his friend General James Wilkinson, who was a United States Army officer secretly in the pay of Spain and the
Mhm.
governor of the Northern Louisiana Territory. Expecting war to break out between the United States and Spain over boundary disputes, Wilkinson and Burr planned on invasion of Mexico in order to establish an independent government there. Possibly the record is inclusive. They also discussed a plan to foment a sectionist movement in the West and joining it to Mexico to found an empire on the Napoleonic model. I don't know if I don't know when Napoleon was a thing. Maybe around this time, I guess. I really don't know, to be totally honest. Um, in any event, Wilkinson became alarmed and betrayed Burr to President Jefferson, so he outed him. Trying to escape to Spanish territory, Burr was arrested and returned for trial to Richmond, Virginia, the site of the nearest federal court that could hear a trial for treason. Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court John Marshall presided in his capacity as circuit judge for Virginia. At that time, circuit courts had original jurisdiction to try treason cases. The Supreme Court has never had that power. Marshall acquitted Burr on the ground that acts of treason against the United States, by definition, required the existence of a state of war. So I guess that didn't exist in this case. Although acquitted,
So Napoleon, you're talking about
like the French guy.
the Fr
Yeah.
Emperor of France. Okay, so he
Yeah.
became the Emperor of France between 1804
Okay.
and
There you
14,
go.
or and in 1815.
Okay.
That's it.
There we go.
Yeah.
There's a show that I watch on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called, but it's more based on Austria and oh, what's the show called? It's such a good show. But Napoleon has made it in. He's in the second season. They show Napoleon.
Mm,
I just never really knew much about any of this, so I'm like, oh, this was so interesting. So I didn't
mhm.
even know like when he was a thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um. So yeah, so although acquitted, Burr remained under a cloud of suspicion and distrust. He soon left for Europe, where he tried in vain to enlist the aid of Napoleon in a plan to conquer Florida.
Mm,
Napoleon's like, not even me. I'm good.
mm,
Not even I want Florida. Burr remained abroad for 4 years, living in customary indebtedness. He returned to New York in 1812 and practiced law. He married another wealthy widow named Elizabeth Brown Jamel in 1833, but he frittered away much of her fortune within a year. Of course he did. He's just using her. Eventually, she sued for divorce on grounds of adultery, and a divorce decree was granted on September 14th, 1836, the day that Burr died. So, wow. But
mm,
that's it. That's pretty much it for Burr. We are probably going to touch on him again a little later
mhm,
because
mhm,
his daughter, because he does have a daughter with Theodosia, um, who is also named Theodosia, um, she she will go missing.
mm.
Um, no one ever knows what happens to her, but we'll talk about that more in that episode. But that is it
Uh-huh.
for me.
Okay. So this ends this episode 90 of the Next Tape podcast. The Next Tape podcast is available all podcast platforms. We also have a website called Tanika.
Next take podcast.podpage.io.
And where else are we at, Tanika?
Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Next Take Pod.
So we have an email, so you can contact us on mikeltanika@gmail.com. That is mikeltanika@gmail.com. So I'm gonna let Tanika take the mic for today to end
Oh,
things. So
yep.
go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah. So, in this episode, we talked about the affair between Alexander Hamilton and Maria Reynolds. And we also talked about Aaron Burr.
Okay. All right. So anything else you want to say, or that's
Nope.
about it?
That's about it.
Okay. So I'm Mikel, and
And I'm Tanyka.
we're out until
Next week.
all right. Next week it is. Peace, guys.
Bye.